The board on the observation deck used to make Vex 9 feel like a god surveying his creation. Tonight it just made him feel old. 6 lights out of 23 had gone from green to red in the last 2 hours, and Pod 23 sat dark and steady in the corner, refusing to join them. "Sir," the junior technician said, voice cracking, "do we pull him?" Vex 9 didn't answer. His mandibles had stopped clicking an hour ago, which the staff had learned to read as far worse than clicking fast. He was watching one green line on a vitals display, a heart rate lower than it had been in his own lecture hall that morning, on a world that had already sent 17 students home in medical transports. To understand how a professor of 23 cycles ended up here, you had to go back to the morning he'd told his class a lie. He'd announced the practical a full semester early, expecting panic, and gotten it. Gasps, gill flares, Kyla's tentacles blanching pale beside a crystal moon girl who'd gone the color of skimmed milk. He'd enjoyed it, the way he always did, until his eyes caught the boy in the back row who hadn't looked up from a paper notebook. Tree pulp and ink in an age of neural lattices. Quaint, he'd thought. The world he named was Kepler 442b. Acid rain, gravity heavy enough to flatten most of his students into the mud, an atmosphere that ran rich in oxygen and richer in poison. 14 trained survey teams had died there. He expected terror. Jorik puffed his chest and bragged about 17 conquered death worlds, conquered with fleets and weapons. Vex 9 reminded him, not bare hands. Kyla asked, voice small, whether there were safety nets. He told her the nets were for retrieving bodies. Then the human closed his notebook, and that small sound cut through the room the way a tide pulls back before a wave breaks. "A question," Vex 9 said, his interest genuinely stirring for the first time in cycles. 14 survey teams have died on that planet. You don't look troubled." Marcus Webb raised his head. His eyes were an unremarkable brown, and there was nothing unremarkable about how steadily he held them on his professor. "When do we leave?" No one laughed. Kyla caught his sleeve at the door, tentacle trembling, and asked if he understood what a death world actually was. "I'm from Earth," he said, and walked out. That sentence was still lodged in Vex 9's skull 3 hours later at the launch bay, watching the boy pack for an alien planet the way most people packed for a weekend trip. Vex 9 warned him, trained survivalists, military specialists, all dead there. Marcus mentioned summer camp. 8-year-olds left in forests for weeks with no one watching, and humans called it fun. He mentioned Cliff's people threw themselves off on purpose. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that Earth's official safety rating only covered the parts his species had bothered to tame. "And Professor," he added, one boot already inside the pod, "I'm from Montana." The hatch sealed on that word, like a door, closing on a joke Vex 9 hadn't caught yet. Groundside, Marcus didn't run. He built. 2 hours into a 72-hour clock, he had a shelter cut into volcanic rock. 3 hours after that, unbelievably, he slept. When Vex 9 pulled the readout and saw REM patterns registering on a Class X world, he ran the diagnostic twice, certain the sensors had failed. They hadn't. The boy was resting. By hour 6, the board told its own story. Jorik had tried to arm wrestle something the scanners refused to name and lost badly enough to trigger his beacon. Kyla's aquatic gear had drawn something that treated her tentacles as a personal insult. Lair had lasted 4 hours before losing an argument with a carnivorous plant. 17 lights, 17 lessons in the gap between studying survival and living it. Marcus, meanwhile, was cataloguing. He mapped water sources, tagged which plants wouldn't kill him, and struck up what could only be called a functioning truce with something the sensors placed somewhere between apex predator and unusually large landlord. It brought him food. It slept curled against the mouth of his cave like a dog too big for the door it came through. Vex 9 was still staring at that footage when the rescue captain's voice cut through his comm, low and careful. "Sir, the one who hasn't called in. He's from Earth." "You already know that." "Do you know the current listing, not the old one, the one filed after this cycle survey?" The itch started along Vex 9's exoskeleton, the one that always preceded very bad news. Class X. Reclassified, sir. Class G with a notation attached. Recommends quarantine. Says the dominant species shows signs of weaponized evolution. Says do not, under any circumstance, invite them into competitive survival exercises. Class G sat 2 full tiers above Class X. He had dropped a boy onto a death world to test him, and the boy's home planet outranked it by 2 clean categories. He might have sat with that longer if Marcus's vitals hadn't kept drifting steadily toward content. At hour 18, Vex 9 broke protocol and hailed every remaining beacon directly. Marcus answered like a man interrupted mid-picnic. Professor, all good down here. Beacon's right where I can reach it. Activate it, now. That's a direct order. A pause, not fear, Vex 9 realized with dawning alarm, but consideration. Actually, I wanted to ask about staying longer. The silence that followed had real weight to it. Vex 9's mandibles simply stopped moving. You are 18 hours into a Class X world. 17 of your classmates are in medical bays because of it. I am bringing you home. I hear that, Professor. I also read the Universal Student Rights Treaty last week. Once a student's dropped for an exam, the Academy treats them as a temporary sovereign for the duration, and Earth's own law on independent settlement backs that up. Treaty recognizes it both ways. I've got a working camp here. Water, shelter, a security arrangement with the locals that's holding up better than expected. A beat, unhurried. 54 hours left on the original clock. Seems early to call it. You researched treaty law before letting yourself get dropped on an alien planet. Seemed sensible, softer now, almost kind. I've been taking notes, too, what the ecosystem actually does, not what the textbooks guess at. Could be worth something to the department if I get the time to finish it. Vex 9 looked at the treaty file his own computer had just confirmed was genuine, and understood, with the specific clarity of a predator realizing too late it had misjudged something, that he had been outmaneuvered by a student sitting cross-legged in a cave with a monster asleep at his feet. 54 hours, he said finally. A status report every 6. The first real sign of danger, you trigger that beacon yourself. No debate. Understood, Professor. Appreciate it. The line went dead. Vex 9 sat with the one square on the board that had never once turned red, and felt something close to pride elbow its way past 23 cycles of professional dignity. Down on the surface, Marcus lowered the communicator and watched the twin suns drop toward a horizon stained the color of old bruises. Near the cave mouth, the armored scavengers that had adopted him were still ferrying fruit back to their young. His enormous, silent bodyguard shifted in its sleep and made a sound that might, in a kinder light, have been called a snore. He turned to a fresh page in the notebook, its paper still faintly damp, and started a new list. The mineral seam along the eastern ridge, whether the wiregrass could be dried into cords strong enough to hold weight, what the strangler vines actually wanted when they reached toward him instead of at him. There was so much more here than 72 hours could hold, and he intended to make the case for every extra hour he could get. He clicked his pen once, the sound sharp in the quiet cave, and kept writing until the last of the purple light went out of the sky.